right, what is up, everybody? It is College Gamebreakers. We're just pounding out these conference tournament previews right now at the Breakdown Sports because it is the best time of the year. We got to relish in every minute we get. We had some crazy Horizon League games, but we won't be hitting on any of that. It's the West Coast Conference preview. I got my man JD with me here today. You can follow him on Twitter right under his head. I hate trying to spell that stuff out. I've messed up AJ so many times recently, but we got the West Coast here for the West Coast preview. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. West Coast Conference, usually one I follow pretty well. I'm a Pacific alum. Obviously we got Gonzaga mostly we're going to talk about, but I've been following along with the conference previews, and there's nothing better than March and all these different tournaments. Ready to get into it.
There is nothing better. It's always good getting the alums on as well. The breakdown, we got some crazy ones out there with Oakland, Cleveland State, UMass, St. Joe's, and now Pacific. We also have UC Riverside. So we're just covering all of your random mid-major conferences that you want. But let's get right into episode 36. We've been crushing them out here. And with the West Coast, I mean, no shocker here. Gonzaga won it. Undefeated. We'll get more into them later. So as of right now, I would say this is confidently a two-bid conference. If we want to get crazy and someone thinks they can take down Gonzaga, we could potentially get three. But Zaga and BYU are pretty locked it up just because BYU is one spot out of the top 25. So with the infamous quadruple bye here, there's nothing like it. As an alum here and someone who's rooted for Pacific, who I don't want to hate on Pacific a little bit, but they're usually closer to the beginning of that quadruple bye. What's that like? Because there's no other bracket like it.
I'm going to be honest. It makes total sense with this conference. Like, I don't even hate it. There's always the clear top. There's the cream of the crop, and everybody knows it. And it's just ignorant tact. Like, it's not true. So it just further symbolizes the fact that pretty much nobody else has any hope. This year is mostly Gonzaga, but either Gonzaga or BYU or St. Mary's. So to be honest, it's just very fitting.
So I think it's one where the WCC, they know where their bread's buttered. They know if Gonzaga gets out early and they'll make a nice little run in March, that paycheck that they get from the NCAA is a little less and not as fat as when Gonzaga makes the win. This season's definitely not one where they need the quadruple bye, but maybe 10 years ago where they weren't the clear runaway favorites, they would have got caught in the A-10 scenario where I think that's one of the closer ones that does it the best, where you have intro games with the bottom four, then you have the double bye with a few of the other top seeds, but of course, the quadruple bye. So as us being the stats analytics people here, I just got to give a shout out to the WCC for tapping in KenPom to do this bracket tournament, because when we've gone through the prior ones, or when you're looking at this one, no teams played the same amount of teams like they've done, or the same home and away. Some teams doubled up against ones, and some teams didn't even get to catch Gonzaga. So KenPom came in, he ranked it, did a weighted to each one. So before we get into anyone who's got screwed or who bumped up, what did you think of KenPom getting the tap in?
Okay, so normally I actually wouldn't be all for this, which is a little weird because obviously, like you said, we're following along with the analytics. And I clearly big support of the analytics, and this is what we use for betting and whatnot. But usually I wouldn't be all for it because you got to play every team in your conference. What's the regular season for, if not to give you some sort of advantage if you do well? If you have to be in a tournament that you have to win, don't you want to, work for that higher seeding, work for home court advantage, whatever it is in the conference? So usually I'd be against it, but it actually makes total perfect sense for this season. Like you said, like some teams haven't even played other teams in this conference. Some they've played twice, some they haven't played at all. There's no way you have an equal weight, especially who gets to play Gonzaga twice. Like, good luck, as opposed to a team that didn't play Gonzaga at all. So I'm perfectly on board with it. It gives us a weird situation where we get St. Mary's at 4 and 6 with the 4 seed. But once you look at this conference, it actually makes sense. And I don't think anybody's arguing with it.
Yeah, I was about to say, next season, I don't know if I would be as much for as you are, but when you had Gonzaga who played 15 games and then you get a Santa Clara who played 9 conference games in this season, there's just no perfectly way to work it out. And you saw that mush. So JD alluded to it. St. Mary's was 7th technically in the conference at 4-6, but they got the 4 seed. So they got to miss 2 games by getting that bump up, which is huge for them. And LMU was the biggest loser. They were sitting at 3rd at 7-5, but dropped to 5th. So even with the, I guess you could call it easier schedule, we'll get into who they played a little bit later, but no love for that 7-5, which is tough to see because when you go above 500, you don't think you'd be on the halfway point here when most of the other teams didn't crack 500 in conference play. All right, and then the one thing I love Ken Pom. I love Bart Torvik, what they do with their sites. In conference play, I wish you could just filter out teams that play Gonzaga because I just want to put them in their own bracket. And for me to get fun, go to the alternate universe where I think Gonzaga somehow doesn't win this conference. I just want to see how these teams matched up against each other and filter out Gonzaga stats because it's just not fair with them, especially this year.
Yeah,
we saw it with. Go for it.
It's almost impossible to judge some of these teams. Like when I'm going through and trying to decide who's a dark horse or what would it look like if these teams matched up against a different conference. I mean, it's almost impossible to tell, right? This is a weird conference. You have a top and a bottom. If you play Gonzaga twice, that totally blows your numbers out of the water. And what else do we have to choose from? You know, we have teams that, like you said, was it Santa Clara that only played 9 conference games? So it's like it's almost impossible to tell how good these teams are. So we're working with a very limited sample size. But I mean, it's a weird year. We're not complaining too much, right? We got to make do.
No, we got the hoops. We got the conference tourney. And I was about to say the easiest way to say, can we please filter out? Ken Pom ranks all the conferences. The number 1 in blowout wins, thanks Gonzaga, is the West Coast Conference where not about half, over a third of their games were blowout wins. So there's no reason to talk about the conference stats overall when you get that one team going into it. But with this quadruple bye, the bracket looks like an arrow. Pull it up on Twitter, pull it up on the internet, use the Google machine to pull it up because we're not going to walk through it. We're going to jump around on some teams who we find value in, who we think could be a long shot, like you said, maybe a potential upset that we're looking for, and then we'll give you our Final Four and champion. So with teams that we think we should instantly cross out off, there's different ways you could go it. Do you think there's no odds out for this? Of course, the A10 is the only one who's produced some odds other than the big conferences. So shout out the A10 there. But is there a team that you're going to instantly cross off here, JD?
I mean, the lame answer is I'm pretty much crossing off everybody except Gonzaga because some people are already talking about Gonzaga versus the field in the NCAA tournament. So if we're talking about Gonzaga versus the field here, basically crossing off everyone. I do want to give BYU at least some credence because I do think they are the pretty clear number 2 team. So I guess to be nice to BYU, I'll say I'm crossing off everybody who's not Gonzaga or BYU.
So the way I'm saying who I'm crossing off here, it would be St. Mary's, LMU, San Francisco, San Diego. That entire just top half of the bracket. If you have a book that gives odds out, or if you just think any team can make a shot, you got to stick to the bottom because there's no reason to be putting your money, investing it in now because you can just get as good of a price or only have a 1-game payout and bet them the money line against Gonzaga. So that's where you look towards that bottom. BYU is the price where it determines where it opens, if that's a team I'm going to instantly cross off or if it's one I'm going to back. Because when BYU played at Gonzaga, they were plus 1,300 on the money line. When they hosted Gonzaga, so they did have both games against each other, they're plus 500. So neutral site, does it go to perfectly plus 800? And that would give me the instant no that I see zero value in backing BYU at plus 800 where they have to win a game to end up playing Gonzaga there.
Yeah, I want to second what you were saying on the bottom half of the bracket where that might be what you want to circle. There just seems like more uncertainty there, obviously. In a conference tournament where there's a whole lot of certainty, you want to find any uncertainty you can get. And in the bottom, I mean, you have Pepperdine, BYU. I guess you could make a case for Pepperdine. And any of the games before that, Pepperdine themselves could get upset, whereas nobody really sees that happening in the top half.
Nope. So this is where if you load up team rankings, it's a good way where they give you the implied probabilities or projections. They have Gonzaga winning this at about an 83% clip, which I think is that's mean to Gonzaga, where they're going to run the table, not have anyone close, and do that. So that's just kind of where no love given to Gonzaga with that price, where they'll probably open at minus 2,500 minimum. So it's just people laundering money that are putting money on Gonzaga there.
Yeah, I think you have to get a little strained with it. Okay, so it is a tournament. Anything can happen, right? With that being said, have you ever heard of like when Titus and Tate talk about Tom Izzo and the whole manufactured diversity thing, and you have an undefeated season going, and you want to lose one, so your team knows how to lose. They learn how to deal with the loss before the tournament. I feel like the manufactured diversity is pretty much we're given 17% going by team rankings, and I don't think that it's that high personally.
I was about to say, are you pulling out your tinfoil hat here? We're getting in your upsets to watch and your long shots already where you can't hold it back. You got that T-shirt pumping out. What number would, just for fun, what number would you have to do to see Pacific on it? Or do you just, someone like me, I have a St. Joe's ticket tomorrow just because I need to put $10 on it just to make the ride that much more fun regardless of the price?
I'll probably just put a few bucks just because, but there's probably not a number I would ever feel decent about. Okay, I will say Pacific actually did keep it close against Gonzaga for the first half when they played a couple weeks ago. So this isn't like they're an invincible squad. I mean, they're pretty close. They're about as close to invincible as you can get, but this is March and this is college basketball. So, I mean, the number would probably have to be over plus 900 for any team, because I think Gonzaga's winning. So
yeah, because as you alluded to, they get 83%. BYU gets the additional 15% who they think is going to win, and that would be plus 567 exactly. And I wouldn't touch that with a 30-foot pole to bank on them to win a game. And then the other team, I wouldn't want to touch is St. Mary's. I alluded to that in the top side of the bracket. When we get into the upsets, that's probably going to be my pick for I think I can get upset. But this isn't not even your grandfather's. This isn't your 2 years ago St. Mary's team that's bringing in the guys. They've played some pretty rough games, but they've had one of the toughest schedules and non-con. But here, I don't know about you. I look at a lot of just strictly conference stats when I preview the conference tournaments, because what they did, especially in December this season more than ever, it kind of just means nothing at this point.
Yeah, St. Mary's is interesting. Should we get into St. Mary's right now a little more?
Yeah, you want to get into the Marys, the Gales? I'm cool with that. Let's hear your thought.
So my thoughts on St. Mary's, I definitely originally went into this thinking I wanted to fade them. If they play Gonzaga, I'll probably fade them. I don't think any amount of manufactured diversity could make. I mean, we've seen them play twice, and it wasn't close. And that's actually usually been a pretty good bet if I'm remembering historically. I forgot to write down in my research, but I know it's been like, you have the two top dogs going against it in this conference, and everyone thinks, oh, it'll probably be closer, but it's actually usually not as close as people think from what I remember in recent memory. But no, so St. Mary's is a team I was looking to fade because they are way, way down this year, and people see them and they think, oh, that's probably the top contender, or it's them and it's BYU. And they're pretty clearly, in my opinion, not as good as BYU this year. Like you said, they finished 7th. It wasn't a mirage. I know it was a weird year, but it wasn't a mirage. Like going into this season, they pretty clearly had the least talented team that they've had in a number of years. So they're not a bet on team for me. The way I'm approaching them, I'm not sure I want to fade them because it is March, and Randy Bennett, I do think is, I don't know if I'll use hyperbole here, but I think he's like a top 10, top 15 coach. And I mean, I know I watched a lot of St. Mary's basketball, so maybe I'm just biased, but like, I do think he is one of the best coaches in America with what he's consistently done player development wise. So I don't know if I want to fade him. That seems a little dicey. But I have them circled for unders. They may not play a ton of games here. It looks like they're going to play one game, and if they win that, they advance and play Gonzaga. But maybe even Gonzaga I'd consider an under. I mean, that's pretty scary. Depends on the number. But I have them circled for unders because I don't really think they'll get blown out if they lose. I think they're well coached enough. They're going to really slow it down. And so I have them circled as under. I think that's their best path to victory is really slow it down. They know they're not as talented. And they know they can't quite match up. So that's my thought process on St. Mary's. A very, very confusing and very interesting team this year.
Yeah, so you're definitely on the right trend with that because in their games line this season, they're 8-13 to the under. So you're definitely finding some value there. Secondly, I think there's 357 teams in D1. And for some reason, Ken Palm still has teams that didn't compete ranked in tempo, but St. Mary's ranks 348. So there's possibly only 9 teams that run slower than them. And teams don't take that into consideration, where especially in other teams in the West Coast Conference, they try to play with pace. I think you have to go St. Mary's route if you're in the West Coast Conference, and I don't know why you would ever want to play with pace because I don't know how you're going to beat Gonzaga other than just hope that they miss. But with St. Mary's, it's just this team is, I don't want to say they're too reliant on Kusi, but he's an assist master. He's not looking for his shots, and they just don't have that three-point threat like they usually do. They have the worst efficient offense in the conference, and that's just where Bennett, I have to agree that he's one of the best coaches, I would say top 15, because since 2008, he hasn't had a less than 21 season. Just cross this one off for record-wise. I won't consider this one there, but when he's just constantly owning that the West Coast Conference, it's hard to say that you might go against them, but there's one team in there that if they do end up getting them, I think they could potentially catch them, especially based on their regular season results this season when they've played them.
Yeah, like you mentioned, what was it, 21 wins is what he hits. That's usually his mark. I think this year might have almost been a little blessing in disguise, whereas they clearly had a down year. But a lot of people may not really have noticed because, I mean, they didn't play that many games. Their record, it's not a record that you can put up against past years because they didn't play the same number of games. Mm-hmm. And then they're the 4th seed, even though they really finished 7th. They're the 4th seed. And if they bow out, even if they win one game, then they lose to Gonzaga, and everyone's like, who cares? So I actually think people have been paying a little bit closer attention, do realize this is, like you said, they don't have that guard they can go to. They don't have Jordan Ford. They don't have Patty Mills. They don't have Dellavedova. And they haven't really adapted. They haven't had time to adapt. And I do think some people might be thinking they are better than they actually are because they're just not a very good team this year.
Especially if you just sit in a zone on them. They just rely on that 2 ball so much, and they even don't defend the 3 well in there. But I think that's enough Gales talk for us because talking about the team that if they do end up beating LMU or San Fran, they're just going to get the business given to Gonzaga because especially when your rival's down, you want to rub it in a little bit more, make the salt in the wounds a little bit worse. So when they come back up, you need that rivalry out there.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's get our obligatory Gonzaga talk out of the way. My first question, we're not going to do just boring Gonzaga talk about how they're good. I think they should get all 5 guys on the first team, all conference. Colby Ross could potentially be the only guy that you can convince me that deserves to be on there rather than that. Let me hear your thoughts on there is, does Gonzaga deserve the whole first team? Who else has a chance to knock it off, or should they get it? Because this season's just different than anything else. I know you can't take in non-con, or I guess you do consider non-con in the first team overall. It's just, how could you possibly make an argument for anyone like Barrichello, Ross, or Bouye?
I would give it to Ross. I feel like Ross deserves it. I mean, he's been pretty solid. I know it's not a lifetime thing, but he's putting up some really good numbers for this Pepperdine team, and it's basically been a 2-man thing with him and Edwards, whatever the big guy's name is. It's been him, those two, for what seems like forever. I think it's only been the last 2 years or so. But no, I feel like he deserves it. I think he's been pretty impressive. I know they haven't quite been up there with the top dogs, but to go in here as the 3 seed where he pretty much the whole load is on his shoulders, give the other 4 Gonzaga, but give Ross one of the spots.
All right. I can't slander Ross, so he does deserve it to be in there. It's just tough when you're like, does he beat out IA? Does he beat out Suggs? Because Kispert and Timmy are just ultimate locks. Kispert, easily going to win the Julius Erving Award for the top small forward in there. All right, next with Gonzaga. Mark Few's just planted his flag there, and after this season, he can officially never leave. He has to retire as the coach there, correct?
I would think so. I don't really see why he would leave. I don't really see any good reason or good argument, and he's proven he is. I mean, I know people get upset when you use the word blue blood, but like Gonzaga's there. They can schedule prestigious non-conference games. They have proven they can year in and year out compete in the tourney. Although I guess people get mad because they forget they got super close and lost that one year. And what was a super close? And so everyone says they choke. But like in reality, anybody who follows college basketball realizes there's not really anything for a few to prove. So I'd be like 98% sure he retires with Gonzaga.
All right. They went 11, 11, and 1 ATS this season. So everyone was always, I think that's where you get your touts that come in there like, oh, Gonzaga, I just back them every day. They cash. They could be cashing the open number and not closing the other one because the number rarely ever moves against them. 11, 1 or 11, 11, and 1. What number do you feel confident when you fade Gonzaga, or was this season just one out of the dust where you felt 0.0% confident anytime you had an alternate Gonzaga ticket? And I purposely never faded them this season because I just never wanted to.
No, I had never faded them. They're one of those teams I've circled, like Alabama in college football. I'm not going to fade them. Am I going to bet them every single game? No, the lines are inflated. Anytime you get that high, it's whether they're going to run up the score or not, right? So you kind of have to think about it differently than normal handicapping. But no, it was basically if I saw a weird motivation angle, if I saw a weird rest angle, then I'm not going to play them or rematch, something along those lines. But I would feel comfortable playing Gonzaga to pretty much any number. Well, no, I don't want to say any number against any team, but I'm that high. I do think they're the best team in college basketball. So if I get a decent number and it's a good spot, I'm going to bet them. I'm never going to fade them.
All right. Last two things about Gonzaga before we move on. Quiz time, because I know you're big into trivia on campus to campus here. So conference only stats. Just close Ken Palm if you have it right now. What is Gonzaga worse at on offensive efficiency, offensive rebounding rate, free throw rate, 2-point percent shooting? What's their weakest category on offense? It's not weak, but what's their weakest of where's the little hole in the armor?
I'm going to guess offensive rebounding.
Because they don't miss?
I mean, yeah.
That was my exact thinking, because that's where when I was previewing the other teams for prior conferences, especially when you're better teams like the Wright State, they just didn't offensive rebound because they didn't miss. It's actually their free throw percentage where they're at 75.1%. So a few other teams edge them out there. So, I mean, still 75%. There's nothing bad that you can say about that because you're confident with that in March. All right, let's get to
I was just going to say, I feel like most of their main guys are pretty good free throw shooters. So I don't really I can't really think of one guy who would get fouled at the end of games. I would be concerned about them shooting. So yeah.
It's the bench. It's when your bench comes in. When JD and I were obviously high school starters for the varsity team, the Ballers. So once you get up 25 against the little guys in your conference, you get the other guys that come in, blow that big lead, start missing the free throws at the end, make you take your sweats back off. That's where they can definitely give it to.
Yeah, unless you have that one kid who's just not athletic at all and tiny, but he can shoot. So all he does is practice free throws. So unless you have that kid.
It's actually Timmy shoots only 70% of their guys that get actual minutes. So that's where all their misses start coming in for guys that barely play. All right, tinfoil hat time. Let's get some fun with it. Long shots to win. Other than Pacific, no, I'm going to say, if you want to give me your Pacific rant, always got to let the guests go first. Let's get delusional. Let's say your Gonzaga wants to taste an L so they can work that 16 seed like they do in where they say the longest yard, your tune-up game, it's your 16 seed. Who do you like to shock the world here?
Okay, well, we're going to start with Pacific here. Because they actually do have a case. This team been a little all over the place. we will say this: they have a good coach. Damon Stoudemire is a good coach. They have some good momentum going. Stoudemire wants to win games because he's probably, he's trying to get the job at Arizona or whatever the hell. He's trying to move on in his career, right? We are his stepping stone. That is okay with us. We're glad he graced us with his presence, but he has some positive momentum going. He needs that positive momentum so he can get hired. He's trying to be a big name someday.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of momentum going. And when you look at Pacific's resume, doesn't look great at first, but they are 6-1 against teams who aren't in the top four. Like we said, we had a clear top four: St. Mary's, Pepperdine, BYU, and Gonzaga. They're 6-1 against these other teams. And they're hot right now. Pierre Cockrell, their point guard, he started shooting the ball. I think he's taken over double-digit shots in each of their last 4 games. Dishes about 5 dimes a game. He's taken over. Their team's looking good. They have momentum. I feel confident they're going to win that first game because, like I said, 6-1 against these other teams. So that means all they have to do is beat Pepperdine, who, difficult game, but I don't think any of us think Pepperdine's a shoo-in to win that game. They have the talent to pull upsets as kind of the team Pepperdine is, but they're not really a team you ever trust to cover margin. So basically, I'm saying one game they probably win. You could do a money line rollover if you want to, and then you can roll over that money. Yeah, we're rolling over that money. We're beating Pepperdine because that's just one game. We have momentum. Mm-hmm. Sure. So yeah, that's my take. Pacific is getting to the quarterfinals. Then they play BYU, who I think beat us 80 to 58 last time we played them. So I don't think we're winning that game. But
you took them to double overtime though at Provo earlier in the season. Can't let you forget that good game. You guys did not cover, I'm pretty sure, which was one of the gross overtimes, dog goes to die, but that was one of the most impressive games because I remember I watched that one and your offense was not, I mean, it was doing well, but it wasn't anything that was hanging in to get the double OT there.
Well, then I watched the wrong BYU game because the one I watched was awful.
No, apparently. They did get spanked 80 to 52 at home, but the one thing I did see, so they got them twice. They played them tough the one time at Provo, got spanked at home. And Pacific is a team where I'm looking at the conference tournament and seeing when they do get Santa Clara, because Portland's just different bottom. They're 8-0 against Quad 3 and Quad 4. Pacific is taking care of work where they need to. Against Quad 1 and Quad 2, they're 0-8. So, yes, that fluctuates. That's moves. They're beating who they're supposed to. They almost got the double overtime win there. They played Mary's tough the one time they get them. It's just on offense, I'm not impressed, or there's not anything I'm sold that if I need a bucket that this team's going to get it for me because they can't rely on the 3 and they don't really rely on the 2. The offense is kind of a little bit stagnant there. So that's the one thing that does concern me going against Pepperdine, where if it does get late in the game, you got Colby Ross. That's the one guy where I know I'm more confident in him to get a bucket, but I cannot definitely knock Crockwell, where he's running into it now his sophomore season. He's built into it. It'll be good to see him because he's definitely coming back. He's going to be a nice 4-year guy there, where by the end of the time there, I think he definitely is making it all WCC team. Talk to me about their defense, because that's the part where if Pacific makes the run, it's going to be because they're locking down teams where they held Mary's to 58 and they've held other teams to under 60 so far this season. What's been different in this defense because I can't say I've broken down a lot of Pacific defensive tape.
I mean, a lot of what it is they're like athletic enough and they have enough size that they just do decently against teams that aren't more athletic than them, that don't have a crazy advantage. And they do just enough, and they're pretty solid. They're pretty well coached, and I would say they're like an above average defensive team. But when they start playing, I think that's why we see that huge split: 0-8 against Q3 and Q4, or 8-0 against Q3 and Q4, and 0-8 against Q1 and Q2. Once they have a disadvantage, it just seems like teams just keep going to that over and over and over again, and they haven't been the fastest to adjust, and they're at a significant talent disadvantage to some of those teams. Against Pepperdine, I do think they're at a talent disadvantage. So that's an interesting one to watch, but I don't think it's a major. I think it's clear on a few points, which is why I'm a little worried. Colby Ross could just go off because, like I said, teams have kind of gone to it and back to the well. But
Yeah,
long
I'm
story short,
surprised you're
they're
not
decent.
just hyping up the blocks because that's it's been a block party a lot in Pacific, especially with Jordan Bell, where I would think Gonzaga would be the number one team in block percentage, but it actually does end up being Pacific in that rate. So they just the one thing that I do think they can make the run, and they're the second hottest team in momentum in the conference right now, headed into the 20, according to Hazel metrics, what you love to see. And Pacific and Pepperdine has one of the worst momentums heading into the conference tourney. So that's where you guys won 3 of your last 4. Pepperdine was kind of crawling to the finish. The 2-point defense is what you rely on. As long as the team doesn't get hot from 3, you're going to do it. And you don't try to push it with too much pace either, which is where when you catch a Pepperdine team, they're going to be looking to go up and down the court. And when you have the superior defense and you're the slowest base tempo team, I'm always taking the points in that scenario.
Yeah, that's what I would be thinking. A team like BYU would more than likely scorch the nets from 3 against us, but a team like Pepperdine, that's definitely no given.
All right, so I'm going to apologize because, one, my flow is nowhere near on the level that Leah Pepe's. Is that how you say it? Because I know you're the West Coast guy. You're much closer to Hawaii than I am. I'm expecting your accent to be a lot better than my Philly accent. But Keely's Hair and LMU, they're a team, even though they are in the top, which I hate, and that's where I said you don't back a team. I think they clip St. Mary's, and I think they're the ones that they have no chance to give Gonzaga a run for it, but they got the hair factor. They are the team that has over-exceeded expectations the most, according to Ken Pom and Bart Torvik, where they weren't projected to be an above 500 team in conference, and that's where they ended up being. Sure, they had the more of the gracious schedule where they played Gonzaga once, BYU once. All the rest was against the more of the bottom, so they did stat pad a little bit. Loyola Marymount, I mean, it's just because it's Eli Scott and Keely's got a decent shot. He's not a world beater. That team is just so unathletic. So that's where when you saw them against Gonzaga and a team where they just milked that one. That was just a pickup game for them. They were having fun the whole time out there. It was Gonzaga's senior night. Can they make a run? Maybe. Am I confident in it? No. But if there's a team in the top and an upset that I'm looking for is I do believe Loyola Marymount would be listed as very short dogs, probably 2 to St. Mary's, but that would be a team that I'd be looking to back in the top if I had to pick one and you had to twist my hand. Can they beat Gonzaga? I mean, maybe if Eli Scott goes for 50. That's the only way I see this one happening here. So that's where I know we're trying to have fun, put our tinfoil hats on. When I look at the top, that's the only team that I think could potentially give Gonzaga a run for their money. I know you like the team all the way out. They're going to be dead tired by the time they play Gonzaga. But why do you think the Dons can make a run, or do you think they can just win 2 games and that's a pretty good run for them?
I feel like they could make a significant run, and I wouldn't be that surprised. They've had a down year that many weren't expecting them to have. Mm-hmm. But anytime it comes to March, you look at a team and you go, okay, so they're not really at a big talent disadvantage. They're talented. They're more talented than they've played. They have 2 great guards, Khalil Shabazz and Jamari Booyah. Great names, good guards. Those are older guards. I don't know if they're both seniors, but they've been there forever. They have a lot of experience. So, of course, they could beat San Diego. Of course, they could beat LMU. Like you said, LMU is a team that usually takes care of business, but they're not really the cream of the crop.
Nope.
So they could win that game. No one would be that surprised. St. Mary's, like we said, is a much weaker team than you would expect in this conference. So I don't think anybody would be shocked if they beat St. Mary's. So I think if San Francisco went to the semifinals here, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't count on it.
No, I wouldn't. That's where a team that I wouldn't be counting on it. And it's tough to say a team that's dropped 6 in a row would be one. But the thing is, it's even tough to say they took care of business, but their only conference wins were against San Diego and Portland. And then they got Santa Clara once. So a team of the Dons that's usually a sneaky underdog. They caught Virginia, which is still probably one of the strangest outcomes of this entire season, that San Fran sitting at 10-13, 4-9 in the West Coast Conference, took that neutral site game by one with the Dons. But what you said with Bouye and Shabazz, where those are two guys, maybe it's the system, I just think it's more of the like supporting cast where it's thinner than usual most years up there with the Dons. Bouye's a senior, Shabazz is a junior. Maybe they both come back because this year doesn't count. And they stink at getting to the line. They're the second coldest team going into the conference. But the one thing that does help them and why they can make the run, they're the best at creating turnovers. And especially when you're playing Loyola Marymount and you're playing St. Mary's, if you turn them over, you get those easy buckets. That's where it is, because if they start fouling in games, that's what cost them a lot with the Dons. And if you're backing them, they fouled often, sent teams to the line, and they could not protect the arc. They let teams go on insane shooting streaks in their current losing streak, but they were playing against Pepperdine, Gonzaga, and BYU during that. So they're going to get back to their level. I do agree with you. I think they take one game. I just can't go against Loyola Marymount and Leah Pepe, just because it's too cool. I need to see him go as far as we can, because I don't think this is his last year there, but it would be sad if this is the last season we get there, because he's definitely a guy that I don't know if you've ever seen him live, but he seems electric.
I've mostly tried to change the channel. I thought he was the same guy as, I think there's a guy at UC Riverside who has a huge mullet going as well. A similar looking thing. I thought they were the same guy.
It's weird. I don't know how the mullet has came back this season, where the guy on Baylor today as well, he has a gross one. But I feel like more in Texas that fits in.
I don't know why on the West Coast we have UC Riverside and LMU. Like, something is going on here with these kids nowadays, and it needs to stop because the mullet cannot come back. I am anti.
All right, so it's a perfect way to get into our final four here, talking about our upsets to watch as well. So talk me through your final four. I know you have a few upsets here because you don't have who we think would be playing BYU and Gonzaga. So give me the quick hitters on your upsets of how you get to your final four and who you got in your finals, and then don't tell me who wins yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with these upsets, and I don't feel super confident. But, yeah, I'll take Pacific. Sure, they'll beat Pepperdine, and they'll get to play BYU in the quarterfinals. Am I saying who goes to the finals?
Yeah.
So, yeah, BYU is going to take that one. I think they're going to shoot the lights out and bury us. Good story. Here, sure, I'll say San Fran gets hot. They look good. Sure, I'll say they knock off LMU. They look good. I'm actually going to say St. Mary's knocks them off, because, I mean, I don't really see San Fran. There's been no signs they're getting that hot. So, like, sure, I'll take them, because why not? There's not that much talent going against them. And then St. Mary's will get the doors blown off, lose by 36 to Gonzaga, and then Gonzaga will beat BYU. I'll say they take it a little easy. They don't really put the pedal to the metal, and I'll say they knock off BYU by like 8 points, 7 or 8 points.
So that's definitely a cover, because they laid, I think 11 was their line at home. So I think that does fall right into cover territory. We'll see if you tweet that one out. I don't think you will be, but
no, probably not. No.
So this is where I get torn between this LMU and St. Mary's game to see fan factor. I want to see LMU get it, but with St. Mary's defense, even though the offense is that terrible, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't think LMU gets it off. Bennett's too good. So that's where I do think St. Mary's does face up against Gonzaga, and it turns out much like their regular games this season, and Gonzaga unfortunately makes it to the finals here. At the bottom, I like it where it gets messy, where Santa Clara versus Pacific, I think that's going to be a nice one to watch, where they rely on the threes and the free throw percentage, which is where you guys kind of thrive more. So it's a strength against a strength. And I do think Pacific pulls that one out. I think Colby Ross, we go on a Dwayne Wade type of run, Marquette type of run, where Colby Ross puts the team on his back a la Greg Jennings, gets them to BYU. We're going to keep riding the wave here. We're taking down Provo in Vegas. We're going with Pepperdine to the finals and then just getting their shit rocked against Gonzaga, where it's at least a 25-point L.
I think Pepperdine BYU, if that's the quarterfinal, that might actually be the game I would be most excited to see. I mean, it's for the honors of losing to Gonzaga. Most likely, it's not a foregone conclusion, but I think BYU Pepperdine's a good game in my opinion.
Yeah, BYU Pepperdine would be pretty solid this season, even though let me see what their results were. I thought I remembered them, but I don't have them off the top.
Oh, that was before Colby Ross became Dwayne Wade, so it doesn't count.
True. It doesn't count. Yeah, they lost both. They got them once by 3 at home and then lost by 9 on the road. So, yeah, we're riding that wave. We're going on Kobe Ross, Dwayne Wade style here.
Nice.
All right, and that wraps it up for this Tuesday night's episode. We both think Gonzaga takes the West Coast Conference. If you want to check in, probably go a little bit longer. We aren't expecting to go 41 minutes here, but JD will be joining back next week for the Pac-12, where we get to talk a little bit more teams that are ranked in the top 50, even though that conference may end up with the same amount of teams in the tournament that the West Coast Conference does at the end of the day. As usual, check out thebreakdownsports.com. Follow us on Twitter at BRKDWN_sports. Under our heads, you can follow us there. Definitely make sure to check out Campus to Campus. That's where, if you like JD's analysis and you want to hear him directly in his wheelhouse, our college football pod, the way to get it. DFS content, that's your way to get it as well. JD, I don't know if you have any more words before we sign off.
No, I don't really have much, but I'm really excited to get into March, and thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for keep supporting the breakdown, and we'll see you later.